They could do more pictures in a week than I could do in a lifetime, because they never did them alone. They had these huge departments.
In the days of the 30s, everything was under a studio structure. Everybody worked for the studio. Harry Cohen at Columbia, where I started, not only saw dailies, he knew how to look at dailies.
I think the first thing they were looking at was how the stars looked. And the cinematographer was under a great deal of pressure to deliver mood, to deliver drama, to deliver all the texture that the story demanded, and at the same time keep those stars looking as good as the studio expected them to look. So you had a strong structure watching over the technique of pictures and enforcing certain rules.
The one thing about the old system was that you actually designed the entire movie. You made all these choices. It was a world you created. It wasn't a world you went out and found.
It was the director on the set who orchestrated each craft's contribution to the storytelling process: scripting, costume and production design, lighting, camera movement, editing, acting. Supported by an army of experts and technicians working together to achieve the most emotionally compelling result.
All right, Freddie, you know you've been after the girl unsuccessfully. So this time must be very tender, very earnest, and very sincere, and rather quiet. You all ready, Duke? Ready. All right, roll it.
In the days of the studio system, that had everybody under contract. They had a bungalow for writers, and you would find Benchley, Parker, Fitzgerald, Sidney Buckman, row by row. So it was a much more efficient matter to say, let Fitzgerald do the love scene, let Parker do the comedy scene, let Buckman make sure that it's structured properly. Just monkeys on a typewriter. They were very clever monkeys. That's what happened to Casablanca, at least as I understand it. There was this fellow who wrote the play, Everybody Comes to Rick's. Then the Epstein brothers got involved in rewriting it. Then Howard Koch got involved in rewriting it. And somehow, out of this potpourri came this marvelous movie.
You must remember this. A kiss is just a kiss. A sigh is just
Casablanca, one of the greatest love stories ever told, was made in 1942 in the consummate studio style. At least 6 writers worked on the script. The cast included 34 nationalities. But what truly engaged international audiences in Casablanca was not the dialects, but the way the picture was directed, lit, photographed, acted, and edited. The style of Hollywood filmmaking at its height. So effortless, so masterful, that it's often invisible to the audience.
as time goes by.
Sam, I thought I told you never to play.
The way I was brought up to think, the only thing that should be left on the screen is the story and the actors, and everybody else should just disappear.
Because it's deceptive, because it's more subtle, it's harder to see, but it's not invisible. If you learn how to look at it, it's not invisible. It's very precise and really very artful.
Cameramen like Harry Stradling that I began with and Boris Kaufman, the whole point was to do something so well that nobody noticed what you did.
Camera technique grew into a set of rules that while an image could be beautiful, it wasn't to be so beautiful as to draw attention to itself, nor should the technique of camera movement nor cutting draw attention to itself.
I remember a very sweet editor who used to do Ann Miller pictures at Columbia when I was starting out. And he would bring me in and show me, now you always start with a long shot, and then you work your way into the closer shots, and then you can go over shoulder if you have them, and then close-ups. In other words, you were taught a formal way.
Now. He's looking at you, kid.
This polished surface became much more important, that the audience wasn't to notice cuts, the audience wasn't to notice camera movement, and all this, which was to the good in terms of not interrupting the story.
What I learned was that what you have to do is to try to make editing seamless. You should never be aware of cuts. You want to feel as though that scene is taking place in front of your eyes as you speak, and you're looking at a proscenium arch, but you're not looking at a proscenium arch. You're much closer. You're much more involved. You're within the proscenium arch.
So that in some sense, the style becomes illusionistic.
Are you ready, Ilsa?
Yes, I'm ready.
The style is saying, come into this world.
Bye, Rick. God bless you.
Gotta hurry, you'll miss that plane.
The audience isn't distracted from following the story and the character's flow of emotion by an uncertainty about the style itself.
The invisible style of storytelling, perfected in Casablanca, was reproduced in picture after picture. But Hollywood was also flexible enough to encourage its best directors to bring their own individual flair and eccentricity to the house studio style. Howard Hawks was one director who could obey Hollywood's rules but still bring his own understated, slightly ironic stamp to a legendary gangster picture like Scarface.
We just collected actors and went ahead and made it, and the whole thing was a challenge and a lot of fun, especially to have it turn out very well and become a kind of a legend.
On one viewing, a regular audience would look at it and say it's a gangster picture and really enjoyable and this is great and the bad guy gets his at the end and all that. But when you go, there's something extra about it. There's something glowing from the screen that it comes out of the blacks and whites of it. You know, it goes like silver. You can really see the silver and the nitrate coming through, and it gleams the movie. And when you go to look at it and you go to study it a few more times, you realize the photography is a certain way, the angle of the camera. Again, the invisible style, very much Hawks' invisible style. And the use of the X's and the crosses every time somebody gets killed. You don't notice it at first. Somebody has to point it out to you, and then it's more fun when you see the film a second time.
Want to dance with me?
The use of music. When Anne Dvorak tries to dance, she tries to get George Raft to dance with her. Just watch that scene. You know, how the camera, how she moves. You know, it's a very special film.
Like that music?
Howard Hawks told his stories simply and economically. Other directors liked to play the showman. Orson Welles is one of the legendary storytellers in American cinema. From Citizen Kane, which he directed at age 25, to his later films, he tried to push the Hollywood style to its limits.
Orson Welles is the man who started the game of showing off. He, in 1948 or 9, whatever it was, at 24 years of age, he came out and said, now I'm going to show you what a director really looks like. And we've been using his ideas not quite as well as he did ever since. But he began the director as star.
I became very enamored of what you can do with film, what you can do in the editing room with film, what you can do with a camera moving. The first time I realized what a director did was when I saw Citizen Kane on television, Orson Welles. However, I was very cognizant of a style and a beauty and a poetry, let's say in John Ford up to that time. But if you had asked me what John Ford did, I couldn't tell you that he put the camera a certain place to get the sky that way, and he used a red filter in black and white films to make the clouds come out, and he shot it a certain way so that the dust came up, and it was an incredible, terrible beauty. What device do I want to use to be able to get this idea across, this emotion across? Wherever I can get it, get the inspiration, fine. But I think I try to find the best device, even if it's a simple device of holding the camera static and letting an actor move across the frame and not moving and not cutting. And, you know, that's the danger. You want to say, well, it may be too arty. This is too much. This is overdoing it. This is overkill. This is too subtle. Now what do? We have to go in tighter, maybe, you know. And so I'm aware of all of that. It's a constant battle.
William Wyler is an established figure in the Hollywood pantheon. His style was elegant and unassuming, always finding the perfect relationship between actor, decor, and camera.
Wyler had a solid image, It was up there on the screen, it was unshakable. It wasn't diffused, it wasn't, oh, I think I'll take a medium shot from the side. When he chose that camera angle, it was the only camera angle.
A little thing like that kind of breaks the monotony.
What he devised with Greg Toland, the deep focal length lens, how everybody was in focus in wide shots. We always think of the audience. I remember Michael Powell would say, I never think of the audience. I would say that too, I never think of the audience, but we don't mean it that way. What we meant was that we can't think of it at the moment while we're doing it. What is the audience going to think? We know that a certain angle, a certain camera move, a certain line of dialogue, a certain cut is going to, we think, will create a certain impression emotionally and psychologically in the audience.
This process of frightening is done by means of a given medium. The medium of pure cinema is what I believe in. The assembly of pieces of film to create fright is the essential part of my job.
One of the things that makes Hitchcock's films still to this day so enjoyable, and even if you know the story, it doesn't matter. You can watch it over and over again, was because he thought of the audience so much.
Help! Help me!
I just looked at Rear Window again on the weekend, and you have this incredible moment where he's sitting alone, and suddenly a shadow covers his face. And he opens his eyes, and you see this beautiful face of Grace Kelly come into frame. And this point of view is just, you're there, you are him. You are him at that moment, and you're just seeing the most beautiful face. It's very, very seductive. The point of view means that it's exactly, as much as possible, exactly the way the character is seeing a scene, or he's seeing a person. There's so many point of view shots you could deal with in terms of Hitchcock. There's a few that I really like in The Wrong Man. There's a moment, I think, when Henry Fonda is brought to all these places that were robbed, and they tell the woman, take a look. Does that fella look like that guy over there that robbed you?
It's the same.
It's one of the films we studied for Taxi Driver, where utilizing this idea of the point of view where everything goes through Travis Bickle's mind and his eyes. We see everything as much as possible in the film through him. And that's one of the reasons we studied The Wrong Man, because it has that feeling of claustrophobia and paranoia that was so perfect for a Taxi Driver.
Someday a real rain will come and wash all this scum off the streets.